Welcome to the Week 4 NFL Sports Betting Picks video here at 4deepbets.com. I'm your host, Benny Ricciardi, and we're going to be taking a look at the opening lines for Week 4 of NFL action from DraftKings and FanDuel and trying to find some value on each game. The first game we're going to talk about is the Detroit Lions taking on the Green Bay Packers. Detroit is 2-1, coming off a win against the Atlanta Falcons 20-6 on Sunday. Green Bay also 2-1 on the season, coming off a come-from-behind victory against the New Orleans Saints 18-17. When I run my numbers on this game, I get Green Bay should be favored by 1. So I do think we have the wrong team favored here, but it's not really that big of a deal. When you're down here talking about these numbers, -1, +1, the game is basically a pick 'em. The reason why I mention it, though, is if I do like the Green Bay Packers, I'm not going to take the Packers +1 or +1.5 because there's very few games that do end on that, even though the Packers' last game did end at 1 point here. But the thing to do when you think the wrong team is favored and the number is down here is actually to just go and take the money line. So I like the money line on FanDuel at +106. Like I said, I do think the Packers should be a slight favorite here. I have the Lions as the better team, but that would be on a neutral field. This game's not on a neutral field. It's in Green Bay. Therefore, Green Bay gets a slight edge there for my numbers. So I think Green Bay is the team that's more likely to win this game. Getting them at +106 on the money line is a little bit of value. Not a ton. Don't go crazy with it. But there is a little bit of value on the Green Bay Packers here. So now we have our first 9:30 in the morning Eastern time start. This is the game that's going to be taking place in London. We have our first international game of the season between the Atlanta Falcons and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Atlanta is 2-1 on the season. They're coming off their first loss in a game against Detroit, 20-6, where the offense really didn't get going. The Jags are also coming off a loss, but a much worse loss. They lost to Kansas City last week. They are now 1-2 on the season because this week they lost to the Houston Texans, 37-17 in a game that shocked a lot of people. Now, I'm not making too big of an adjustment to the Jaguars here, but I do think the Jags should be favored in this game by about 2.5 points. Now, remember, there's no home field advantage added here. Otherwise, that would probably be closer to 4.5 points. Because this game is at a neutral field, it's in London right now, but I do think the Jags are a better team than the Atlanta Falcons, even though they didn't really look all that great last week. So I have Jags -2.5. I mean, I guess technically there's a little bit of value on the Falcons getting a full field goal, but this is a game that I'm going to be avoiding. So now we move on to the 1 o'clock games on Sunday. And the first one we're going to talk about is the Minnesota Vikings against the Carolina Panthers. Both of these teams are 0-3 on the season, so somebody's going to be getting their first win, most likely here, unless it ends in a tie. Minnesota's coming off a loss to the Los Angeles Chargers, 28-24 on the game that they had a lead. Seattle beat the Carolina Panthers 37-27 last weekend. I got to be honest, guys, when I look at this game, I actually have it as a pick 'em. I actually thought Carolina with Andy Dalton actually looked better than they did with Bryce Young out there. So, it's going to be interesting to see who the quarterback of this game is. I mean, again, I don't think you really deserve to take any points away from the Panthers. And that's kind of what it looks like Vegas did here, is take a couple points away for Andy Dalton being the quarterback. For me, this game is a pick 'em. So to get a full +3 on Carolina, that's actually the side of this game I like. I think there's a little bit of value there on the Panthers. Next game up, the Denver Broncos are taking on the Chicago Bears. Denver 0-3 on the year, coming off a loss to Miami, 70-20. That was an absolutely ridiculous offensive explosion by the Dolphins there. Chicago also coming off a loss, 41-10 against the Kansas City Chiefs. So both of these teams got blown off the field last week. Justin Fields, we got to see what the deal is with him. He has not looked good. He has not played well so far this year. I get that Denver should be favored in this game, but I think that this is too many points. I have Denver favored by 0.5. So it's about 2.5 too many. Now, listen, on DraftKings, I probably wouldn't touch it at the -2.5. On FanDuel, though, you can get the Bears at a +3. It is juiced up to -118. I don't love that, but, if you're looking for the right number, +3 is probably the right number. If that hits -110, I hate to say it, but I actually think there's a little bit of value here on the Bears. Next game up, the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Cleveland Browns. Baltimore 2-1 on the year, coming off a loss to an upstart Indianapolis Colts team, 22-19. Cleveland, they are 2-1. They're coming off a win over the Tennessee Titans, 27-3 in their last game there. When I break the numbers down here, I get Cleveland should be favored by 1.5 points. I actually think Baltimore is a slightly better team on a neutral field, but this isn't on a neutral field. The game's going to be in Cleveland. Therefore, you got to make an adjustment for home field. And that's why I think the Browns deserve to be a favorite here. Again, at 1.5, I'm right on market. Not much to talk about. So the next game up, Pittsburgh Steelers against the Houston Texans. Pittsburgh is playing on Sunday night, and we do this at halftime of the Sunday night football game. Therefore, neither DraftKings nor FanDuel has posted a number for this game yet, so not really much we can talk about in terms of what the opening line is. I will say when I break my numbers down, I get Pittsburgh should be favored by a field goal in this game. If it's any more than a field goal, I actually like the Texans. The Texans looked great last week in their win over the Jags, 37-17. They're at home here. Like I said, if it's any more than a field goal, give me the Texans side of this game. So we'll have to see what this opens at after Sunday Night Football finishes and, the number finally gets posted. Next game up, the Miami Dolphins taking on the Buffalo Bills. Miami is 3-0, coming off a massive win against the Denver Broncos, 70-20. Just an absolute offensive explosion for them. Buffalo 2-1 on the year, coming off a win against the Washington Commanders, 37-3. Just an absolute beatdown for them. These are two very, very good teams. When I break this all down, though, I get Buffalo should be favored by 3.5 points. So the fact that this is under 3 right now, again, it's juiced up under 3, but it's still under 3. You can get Buffalo at -2.5. I think that's the way to go here. Again, if it's -3, I'm probably staying away from this. But if you can get on the side of that key number at -2.5, even if you got to pay a little bit of juice on it at -118, I still think that's the right way to go. And that's what it is on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Next game up, the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The Rams are 1-1. They play on Monday Night Football against the Cincinnati Bengals, so we'll have to see what happens in that game on Monday night. Indy is 2-1, coming off a win against Baltimore, 22-19 in their last game. When I break this all down, I'm closer to the DraftKings number. I get Colts should be favored by 0.5. So this is something I want everybody to notice here. So the Rams are +1 on DraftKings, -1.5 on FanDuel. The Colts are -1 on DraftKings, +1.5 over on FanDuel. Like I mentioned to you guys all the time, there really isn't a huge difference when you're talking about those numbers on one side or the other of the zero. And if you look at the money line, none of this is at even money. It's all being juiced, for the money line for both teams on both sites right here, which means that this game basically is a coin flip, slight lean to one team on DraftKings, slight lean to the other team on FanDuel. Obviously, you're looking for the best number. So if you're going to bet this game, take the money line. If you're going to bet the Rams, take the money line -105 on DraftKings. If you're going to bet the Colts, take the money line -104 over on FanDuel. You do not want to bet both sides of this game because you're guaranteed to lose a little bit of money in that case. Just look at the way everything works out. So you're going to be staying away from this. Like I said, I have the Colts favored by 0.5 point. Not really enough for me to get excited. Next game up here, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the New Orleans Saints. This is a tough one to break down. And as you can see, DraftKings doesn't even have a lineup because Carr did not finish that last game for New Orleans. Jameis Winston came in. If Carr is in this game, and again, the Bucs are 2-0, that they play on Monday Night Football against Philly, so we don't know what's going to happen there either. If Carr is in, I would think the Saints deserve to be favored by 2.5 points in this game. If Winston is the quarterback here for the Saints, I would think that this game deserves to be a pick 'em. Pretty sure this is the week Alvin Kamara comes back as well. So a lot of moving pieces in this game right here. Not really much to do. Like I said, again, even with Carr, I have Saints should be favored by 2.5. So take that +3 on the Buccaneers over on FanDuel. Assuming everybody comes out of the Bucs game healthy tomorrow, that's probably the side you want to be on here. And if Winston is the starter, then you're definitely going to get some good value with the Bucs at +3 because it shouldn't be that high. Next game up, the Washington Commanders taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Not really a ton to talk about here. Washington is 2-1, coming off a bad loss to Buffalo, 37-3. Buffalo being a very good team, but we just expected a little bit better showing from Washington if they were going to be a legit contender this year. Philly plays Tampa Bay on Monday Night Football, so we'll have to wait to see how that game, assuming everybody comes out of that game healthy. I have Philly should be favored by 7.5 points here. So I have no bet, even though -7 is a little bit below my number. If it was 6.5, then I would be fine laying that number with the Eagles because I have 7.5, and we'll get to the right side of that -7 key number. But with me being at 7.5, the number being at 7, no bet here. Next game up, the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Tennessee Titans. In this one, Cincinnati 0-2. They play on Monday Night Football against the Los Angeles Rams. We are not 100% sure if Joe Burrow is going to play. We wouldn't be 100% sure if Joe Burrow is going to play in this game either, depending on how he comes out of the last one. Joe Burrow is worth about 6 points to a spread, so this could definitely change things depending on whether or not he plays and is going to be available for this game. Assuming that Burrow does play, I would have the Bengals deserve to be favored by 2. If Burrow doesn't play, I would have Tennessee should be favored by about 3.5. So it kind of almost looks like, they kind of split the difference here on Vegas and put Titans at -1.5 here. Like I said, if Burrow plays, the Bengals deserve to be favored, and there's value on it. You take that +110 money line over on FanDuel if you think Burrow plays next week. If Burrow is going to be out for this game, though, there probably is value on the Titans at -1.5. That number should get up to at least a field goal, if not more. Like I said, my number is like -3.5, maybe even closer to -4 without him. But again, without us knowing that right now, you're basically just kind of rolling the dice. Next game up, the Las Vegas Raiders taking on the Los Angeles Chargers. The Raiders currently playing on Sunday Night Football against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Halftime of that game, the Raiders are down 13-7 going into the half. The Chargers, 1-2 on the year, come from behind victory against the Minnesota Vikings, 28-24. When I break this game down, again, assuming nobody gets hurt in that second half of the Las Vegas game, that would really matter. Chargers should be favored by about 1.5 points in this game right now. That's the way I'm looking at it. We'll have to see how that all works itself out. Next game up, New England Patriots against the Dallas Cowboys. We are in the 4 o'clock window on Sunday right now with these games. Patriots are 1-2 on the year, got their first win over the New York Jets, 15-10 last weekend. Dallas coming off a really bad loss to the Arizona Cardinals, 28-16. They are now 2-1. I'm not making a massive adjustment to the Cowboys. I mean, sometimes things just happen like that, and they just did not play very well last weekend after beating the Jets the week before. They come back home for this game here. I get Dallas should be favored by 7.5 points. Anything you can get on them below a touchdown. So at this -6.5, I think there's value. So I'm willing to lay the -6.5. Lay it on DraftKings at the standard -110 juice rather than taking the -115 on FanDuel. That's the way I'd play this game here. Like I said, my number is 7.5. Next game up, the Arizona Cardinals, fresh off that win over the Dallas Cowboys, their first win of the season at 1-2, 28-16 in that one. They are taking on the San Francisco 49ers, 3-0, coming off an extra rest after beating the Giants on Thursday Night Football by a score of 30-12. Listen, I think the 49ers are a deserving big favorite here. I have them at -14. The spread is -14. Therefore, I don't really have any value on this game. Do I think the 49ers win it? Absolutely. Do I think the 49ers win it going away? Absolutely. Do I think the Cardinals win last week was a little bit of a fluke? Yes, I do. But there's no value here for us to bet on at -14. Next game up, we go to the Sunday Night Football game. The Kansas City Chiefs coming into our area to take on my New York Jets. The Jets are 1-2 on the year, coming off that loss to the New England Patriots, 15-10. Kansas City 2-1 on the year, coming off that big win over Chicago, 41-10. And I don't mean big win because it was a close game. I mean big win because they beat them by 30 points. Kansas City is a deserving favorite in this game, although I think it's a little bit too high. I have Kansas City -6 is the number that I should have. Oh, do I really want to take the Jets at +9? My numbers are telling me to take the Jets at +9. Kansas City has been a team that's been bad against the spread. Yes, they win a lot of games, but they don't win a lot of games going away. If the Jets defense can keep this down, Kansas City's weakness is their defense. The Jets' weakness is their offense. Maybe the Jets actually put up some yardage this week, unlike what they did against New England last week. If they can get on the board once or twice and the defense keeps them under 24 or so, 9 is a lot of points to ask here. So Jets +9 is the way to go. But man, I would not be putting a house on. Last game, the Monday Night Football game, the Seattle Seahawks travel to New York as well, or New Jersey technically, to take on the New York Giants. Seattle 2-1 on the year, coming off a win over Carolina, 37-27 in their last game. Giants 1-2 on the year, coming off some extra rest after losing to San Francisco 32-12. When I break this all down, I get the Giants should be favored by about 1.5 points. That means I think the wrong team is favored here. Again, like we had mentioned before, when you're talking about 1 point or 1.5 points on either side of the number, the games are basically a coin toss. I do think there's a slight value by taking the Giants, who I think should be favored here at +102 on the money line. Would not mess with the spreads in this one at all, but the money line, there is a little bit of value on the Giants at +102. Not enough for me to empty the bank account, but enough if you want to make a wager. That's probably the side you should be in. And there you go. That's going to wrap it up for our first look at the opening lines in the Week 4 NFL Sports Betting Picks video.